You're listening to the Bill McIntosh Show. Tell us about the most dangerous customs that get people in the hot water.
I think people who are cultivating relationships with demons, the people that are involved in going to like seances and ghost hunting, so they are actively trying to establish a connection and relationships with demons.
Bill McIntosh Show, Quorum Radio, Red State Talk Radio, on with Father Vincent P. Lampert. You may wonder who he is. Well, this isn't so much political as it's pushback against the forces of darkness. He's a graduate of St. Meinrad College and the University of St. Mary of the Lake Mundelein Seminary. Father Lampert was ordained a priest for the Archdiocese of Indianapolis in 1991. In 2005, he had an interesting change in his job description. He was appointed as the Exorcist for the Archdiocese of Indianapolis, Indiana. He received his training in Rome as a member of the International Association of Exorcists. He's also author of the book Exorcism, The Battle Against Satan and His Demons. He currently gets some 5 to 6 inquiries a day for his services. Father, is that still accurate? 1,800 a year? Is that about right?
It's not right anymore. I now get 3,500 calls and emails a year. So I average about 70 a week.
Father Lampert, I wanted to start things off in this way. You know, if you could do anything to kind of give present-day society a big message, sort of a light to light up the world at this time of great moral darkness and uncertainty, what would that rhetorical statement be?
I think the best statement that people would need to hear today is that having a relationship with God does matter. We're living in an age when a lot of people no longer believe that God exists or that they can do just fine without God in their lives. But I always like to tell people that faith in God will lead us in one direction, and the lack of faith in God will lead us in another. And we're living in an age when faith is in decline. And the corollary that goes along with that, faith is in decline, that we're seeing an uptick in demonic activity and the number of people who believe that they're up against the forces of evil. So again, I think the basic message that people should hear is that a relationship with God does make a big difference in their lives.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm glad to hear that. We live at a time when people are confused about gender, confused about the sanctity of human life. Let's start off with just a basic stat. How many exorcisms approximately, because maybe you've lost track, how many have you performed, rough estimate, since 2005 when you became an exorcist?
Well, when it comes to extraordinary demonic activity, there are 4 different types. So there's demonic possession, where the devil or some demon will take control of a person's body, treating that body as if it were its own, using the person's mouth to speak, their eyes to see, their ears to hear. Those cases are extremely rare, perhaps 1 out of every 5,000. So over the last 17 years that I've done this ministry, there have probably been about 15 cases of true demonic possession. The other 3 types would be demonic infestation, the presence of evil in a location or associated with an object. Think of using a Ouija board, think of a voodoo doll, something that is inherently evil that was created to create a connection between an individual and an evil spirit. There's also demonic vexation, which are physical attacks, and demonic obsession, which are mental attacks. Cases of infestation, vexation, obsession, I've done thousands of those exorcisms since 2005.
So you basically need you don't get too many cases of an actual bona fide possession, but you have lots of cases of demonic infestation, vexation, or obsession, right? So
I was going to say it's important that those situations need to be addressed, because if they're not addressed in a timely manner, people that are being afflicted in those ways could end up in cases of demonic possession.
You know, have you seen any differences? It sounds like the intensity, the frequency, the demand for your service as an exorcist is increasing. Is there anything else besides that, 2005 versus 2022, that you've seen? Any types of trends, if you could say it?
Yeah, I think the growing trends are the number of people who grew up in traditional Christian homes, who were baptized, but who have now walked back on their faith, who now identify as being an atheist, or maybe have turned, they say they're spiritual, but they've turned to pre-Christian religious types of practices. So there's a great fascination with the world of the occult, the New Age, but it seems that people have become bored in their relationship with God. And I think the increased attacks on the human person, whether it's people trying to figure out their gender, whether it's abortion, whether it's euthanasia, all of these attacks against the human person are significant because the human person is created in the image and likeness of God. And we could say that the human person is God's greatest creation. And because the devil wishes to be God, attack God, then the devil believes that by attacking the human person and causing confusion about the dignity of human life, then the devil is indirectly attacking God himself.
All right. So, yes, you mentioned these different types of, let's say, supernatural, I guess you call them preternatural afflictions from the demonic. And so, how is it that it happens that somebody will get, let's say, I don't know if you put in the category of a vexation when somebody's home is affected possibly by evil spirits. Would that count as a vexation or what?
That would be infestation. Evil doesn't live in a location. As pure spirit, they don't really occupy space as we understand it. So if evil is manifesting in a location, so if there is demonic infestation, the question we would ask is why? Why is the evil choosing to act there? So did something horrific take place in that location? Were people perhaps engaged in satanic practices or rituals, trying to communicate with the dead, so to speak? So did they do something that caused the demons to take notice and then choose to manifest there? Even in cases of ghost hunting, it isn't that demons live in the abandoned hospital or, prison. It's the very things that people are doing that's attracting the attention of the evil spirits.
You're saying that what people did in prisons or hospitals in the past, or the fact that they're there to kind of look for ghosts or what have you, is that drawing demons or what?
It's both. So maybe the evil that people perpetuated, on other people, acts of crime, abuse. And then when people go in there and they try to communicate with these evil spirits, sometimes they might think they're trying to communicate with the people who used to live there. Exorcists will tell you that 99% of the time when people believe that they're interacting with spirits, they're actually demons who are trying to masquerade as the spirits of people who have died, just as a way to lure people deeper into the world of darkness.
Right. So let me ask you this. I mean, normally you get an inquiry. Generally, that's a family member of a loved one who's afflicted, or is it from a member of the clergy, or what? What does that look like usually when you get an inquiry? Somebody says, "I'm possessed." One of those things. You'd think that if that were true, then they couldn't. They'd have trouble asking you for help, right? Or maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, it comes to all the above. People who are possessed. Just because somebody is possessed doesn't mean they manifest all the time. There are people who are possessed who could be living very ordinary lives, getting up and going to work and that type of thing. But they've created a connection with the demonic world, and then something would trigger that. So even someone possessed could ask for help. Sometimes family members or friends will reach out to me concerned about someone they know. Other clergy, whether they're Catholic priests or even faith leaders of other religious traditions, will reach out to me, being concerned about someone they believe that's up against the forces of evil. So it really is across the board. I will say there's a growing trend in the number of people who reach out to me who have already self-diagnosed, meaning they believe that they're possessed and they reach out to me saying they want an exorcism. But as an exorcist, I'm trained to be a skeptic. So when somebody says to me they're possessed, literally I'm saying to myself, no, you're not. We would have to get to that point by following a very strict protocol that the Catholic Church has in place here in the United States.
Right. Well, you have to weed out a lot of, let's say, wannabe possessed victims, I suppose, or they like to find some sort of explanation for their angst. But when a family has a bona fide case, do they oftentimes find difficulty when they go to the local bishop for help? I mean, is it always the case that they find willing clerics that want to help them to get relief, or no?
I think that unfortunately the answer to that would be no, because there are a lot of priests that aren't trained to really understand what people may be up against. Some priests could even be scared by the fact that someone in front of them is claiming to be possessed, and they may feel inadequate in knowing how to respond. I will say when I was appointed in 2005, I became one of only 12 stably appointed Catholic exorcists in the United States. Today, that number has grown to 150. So the increase in the number of exorcists is a positive sign to people that says to them, the church is listening.
This is to say that there's 150 dioceses, let's say exorcists that pertain to 150 dioceses, or in some cases, does the diocese have more than one exorcist, or what?
Yeah, larger dioceses would have more than one. So there are 150 priests in the ministry, but not every diocese would have a priest designated. Technically, the bishop is the exorcist in his diocese because he has that office by virtue of his episcopal ordination. In Luke's Gospel, chapter 9, verse 1, Jesus sends out the 12 and he gives them authority over all unclean spirits. And because the bishops are the successors to the apostles, then that authority over all demons is now really delegated to them. And then a bishop at his discretion may appoint one or more of his priests in his diocese to do this ministry in his name. And that's very important because I'm the exorcist for the Archdiocese of Indianapolis, so I cannot function outside of my diocese without the permission of a bishop of another diocese. Because again, I'm acting in the name of my bishop who has that authority by virtue of his office.
Right. What happens when, let's say in a given territory, let's say a given archdiocese or diocese, the bishop is, well, how should I put it? Maybe not cooperative, maybe not attentive to an urgent request for assistance. What happens then? I mean, if he could be that. I mean, I'm sorry to think about this, but it seems to me that there's been a lot of thankless exorcists in the country that just can't seem sometimes to be able to get through to, people of the episcopate to be able to indicate that there are some people with real needs in your diocese. Is that accurate? And sometimes, well, what do you do? Is there any recourse for a family who's got a son or a daughter or a family member that seems to be possessed or in some way afflicted by the demonic, and they can't seem to get help from the local ordinary? Can they go around their back and go to you direct? And what happens?
Oftentimes they may try to contact me, but because I don't have the authority, demons are very legalistic and authoritative. If they know that I don't really have any jurisdiction, then even if I were to want to pray with them, I would be ineffective. I recall a case one time, another priest came into my diocese and was doing an exorcism, and he shared with me that the demon manifested and looked at him and said, "Who are you? We recognize the authority of the local bishop, but you have no authority here, so we do not have to obey any of your commands." So if somebody really believes that they're being, afflicted by evil, they might even believe they're possessed, the best thing that people should do is to talk to their parish priest and to get their parish priest on their side, if you will, because he's the one who then can make the appeal, even introduce them to the exorcist in the diocese, if there's one. If not, to make the appeal to the bishop to be able to find help. I've done exorcisms outside of my diocese, but again, only with the permission of that local bishop. And even if people can't get an exorcism right away, perhaps they can find a priest that's willing to pray with them, do deliverance prayers, give them the anointing of the sick. Again, there are things that can be done to give somebody some level of relief against demonic attacks.
Wow, that's good to know. It's just that there's been, from what I've been able to gather, we've seen in the past decades just a reluctance to accept the fact that there are forces of evil that are personal, that can affect people and cause grave harm. And it's amazing that to think that we'd have to give a hard sell to a bishop that about the existence of the devil, but apparently sometimes it's almost necessary. Devils, it seems, that demons have been kind of you're relegated to the category of fables. Is that unfortunately largely true in many dioceses in the United States and outside the country?
I think there is that sense that demons are not real, that maybe they're a metaphor for humanity's inhumane treatment of one another. I mean, official church teaching is very clear that evil is personified in what we call the devil and evil spirits, but there are those within the church that don't accept that. Even when I was appointed in 2005, and my bishop made the announcement at a gathering of priests in my diocese, many of them laughed and said, "Do we really still need this ministry?" So again,
amazing.
Even within the church, there's that lack of belief. Now, the other side of that, because we live in a very litigious society, I think there is some apprehension of wanting to do an exorcism for fear that somehow maybe there's going to be a lawsuit against the church. People think of the case of that movie, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, Anneliese Michel, there in Germany, that there's always that fear that something will go wrong. It's always important for people to realize that an exorcism is really, at its very core, a prayer. So if I'm doing an exorcism, I'm really praying with someone. Now, we live in an age in the United States where many dioceses will require people who believe they're possessed to sign legal documents and waivers and all that type of thing. And, I can say in my diocese that's not required currently. Again, because it's simply praying with someone. And if you're going to pray with somebody, that's at the very core of what the church is all about.
Tell us, Father, I seem to recall that I believe it was in the Archdiocese of Indianapolis some 10 years ago, about just an extremely well-publicized case of a house with children who were being affected, who were possessed, that were climbing walls and even ceilings. Did that take place on your watch, or was that before your time?
That took place in the state of Indiana, but up in Gary, Indiana, which is on the Indiana border near Chicago. So there was a priest from the Diocese of Gary who was involved in that case. And it was a situation where a young boy was possessed, and then people saw him crawling up the wall like a spider and whatnot.
Wow, this is disturbing. Were you consulted at all in that particular case? So you know it pretty well?
I was not consulted on that case. No, I was not.
Wow. So tell us about in your own diocese about some of the, or possibly when you were in training. I understand you went to Rome to receive training from one of the exorcists in the Vatican. Is that right?
Yes, I was in 2006. I was appointed in the fall of 2005, and then in the early part of 2006, I lived in Rome for 3 months, and I found a priest, a Franciscan priest, who allowed me to sit in on 40 exorcisms that he performed. This particular priest, Father Carmine de Philippus, he was trained along with Father Gabriel Amorth. Many people are familiar with Father Gabriel Amorth, the former chief exorcist of Rome. Well, both him and Father Carmine were trained by Father Candido Amentini, a Passionist priest who did exorcisms at the Holy Stairs in Rome, which is a little chapel right across the street from the Basilica of St. John Lateran. So it's really Father Candido Amentini who kind of brought exorcism back into the modern world, if you will. He's now servant of God, so he's on his way of being canonized a saint in the church. But he's really the one who tried to revive the notion that exorcism is an important ministry in the church and something that's still needed even here in the 21st century.
Right. So, what are some of the more disturbing cases of possession and demonic activity that you've seen in your profession? Because you've probably seen some really disturbing, alarming things. Can you share some of that with us, please?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. So in trying to determine true cases of demonic possession, there are 4 things that are looked for: the ability to speak and understand languages otherwise unknown to the individual, having superhuman strength, having elevated perception, meaning knowledge about things that that person as an individual would not know, and then a very negative reaction to anything of a sacred nature. So I've set in on exorcisms, ones that I've witnessed, ones that I perform, where the demon will begin speaking a language, maybe ancient, Greek, Aramaic, speaking in Latin. I've seen cases where the possessed person jumped out of the chair that they were in and lifted the chair over their head with one hand, one of these heavy swivel desk chairs. I've seen cases where you bless the individual with water, holy water, and immediately the eyes will roll back in the head. The person begins to growl and snarl, foam at the mouth. And then there's this hideous grin and uncontrollable laughter, hysteria. I've witnessed a body levitate once the demon has taken over. Eyeballs turn green. The pupils become slanted like a serpent. And, blaspheming, all of these types of things. So all of these manifestations are meant to try to instill fear and terror in the exorcist and anyone else who's involved or sitting in that room where the exorcism is taking place. The demon is basically like a child throwing a temper tantrum, saying, look at me, put the focus on me, and not on what God wants to do in the life of this person who is possessed.
Yeah. Now, there's an issue that comes to the fore because of the fact that we've got this explosion. I think you can call it an explosion in demonic activity and in human activity that tends to open up portals to the demonic. I don't know if that's accurate or not. It sounds like it is accurate. And, so we have all sorts of people doing all sorts of things outside the Catholic Church. You have people, and also within the Catholic Church, you have all sorts of prayer services and different types of things going on, and deliverance ministries and what have you. And something that I've learned, probably through Jesse Romero, is, and maybe he learned it from you and other exorcists, and that is that there's this notion of imprecatory and deprecatory prayers. Can you please explain to us what those are and how they might be important for people to know the difference of, and to know what can be used and what may not be used when they're afflicted in this way with loved ones? Because we know there's so many cases now, it seems.
You're right. There does seem to be a lot of confusion when it comes to exorcism prayers and then deliverance prayers. To me, deliverance prayers are prayers directed to God, who's asked to bring relief into the life of the person who is suffering. The new rite of exorcism that came out in 1999, it has supplicating prayers in there, which was not included in the old rite of 1614. But God is being asked. A sample would be, "Oh God, see how your servant is afflicted by the evil one. Please come to his or her aid and give them the relief that they seek." Now, anyone can say that type of prayer because it's being directed to God. Now, commands given to demons, which would be a major and imperative command, the Catholic Church says that that's reserved to the priest, who's been reserved to do that ministry by his bishop. So only one authorized by the bishop should be given commands to demons, because then the exorcist has the power and the authority of the church behind him. If people are well-intentioned or they believe that they can start giving commands to demons, the church says that that's not a very good thing to do. Cardinal Ratzinger in 1986, when he was in charge of the Congregation for the Propagation of the Faith. Again, he was saying that it's very important that lay people do not give commands to demons. Some people will refute that and say that they have the right to do that based on their baptism. But it seems to me that if one is being disobedient to the church and you're trying to fight demons, disobedience and battling Satan is not a good combination.
Yeah, that's exactly. And I think in the gospel itself, I believe there's mention of a case where, or maybe it's some other writings whereby somebody was trying to cast out a demon and was overpowered by the demon because they didn't have jurisdiction in some sense to be able to do that. Which of course brings me back to Father Amorth, who may rest in peace. He was concerned about the new prayers that were the new set of prayers, or the exorcism manual that was developed. It seems like he, from what I've read or heard, that he preferred the old 17th century prayers.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, that puts him in a situation where if a Vatican office approves one set of prayers and he's not in agreement with that, all of a sudden he finds himself on a collision course. I don't know if that's accurate or not. Poor exorcist.
He was on a collision course with a lot of bishops, because he also said that if a bishop did not appoint an exorcist in his diocese, he believed the bishop was committing a mortal sin. So Father Amorth was very, very outspoken. So he didn't necessarily always win the esteem of others within the church.
What finally happened? Did they finally listen to Father Amorth and say, time out, we have to fix this manual? Or did they make it optional to use the old manual? Or what happened?
So that new rite was promulgated in 1998 under St. John Paul II. It was released in 1999. It was tweaked again in 2004 and 2005 based on recommendations by folks like Father Gabriel Amorth. The English translation came out in 2016. Now, Pope Benedict had given permission for any exorcist to use any of the rites. So the exorcist could use the new rite or the old rite. Now, because Pope Francis has restricted the use of Latin, it's now believed that the old rites can no longer be used.
Wow.
And there's trying to get clarification on that, but that has not yet been clarified. But it is believed that when the Pope restricted Latin, it wasn't just for the Mass, but it was on even the old Roman ritual in which the rite of exorcism was contained.
Wow. This must be really concerning to people in your profession, because of the fact that they, you're driven by, well, how can I give this person and their family, their loved ones, relief from this terrible manifestation and this terrible oppression? Wow. So maybe we don't want to go there. I don't want to get you into trouble with anybody, So anyway, it's fascinating to hear that non-Catholics will seek out help from a Catholic priest. Why would they do that? That's kind of strange. I mean, in a sense, isn't it? What does this tell us? Maybe making that as a rhetorical statement. It's curious.
Well, I think the answer, because I've asked non-Catholics who come to me, and they'll pretty much tell me that the pastor of their church told them that they needed to go to the Catholic Church because the Catholic Church knows how to address this issue.
It's interesting, hard-won respect from men of the cloth from different denominations. Wow. So have you seen this also with, for example, groups like the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Mormons? Have they also sent their adherents to Catholic priests?
I've not had any contact with folks from those faith traditions. Usually they come from other mainline Christian traditions. There's a lot of those folks that I have talked to and worked with over the years. I've talked to people from other world religions, Judaism, Islam. Many people have reached out who have no faith background whatsoever. People that did have a faith background, but then identified as being an atheist. So they're really all across the board in many respects. But there are some faith traditions that I've not had any interaction with their folks.
Right. So then do you find that there's a large uptick in atheists contacting you, or is that just once in a while?
When somebody tells me that they're an atheist, that they grew up in a church, but now they're an atheist, if we're all old enough, we might remember Paul Harvey, where he would give the news and then say, now the rest of the story. So when somebody tells me they're an atheist, I always want to say, well, tell me more. What's the rest of the story? Unpack that a little bit for me. Because usually it's because they had a very negative experience of the church. So it isn't necessarily perhaps that they're true atheists, but they're just using that term. Because when I work with somebody, I always try to determine what was the entry point. So dabbling in the occult, maybe people get caught up in what I call the entertainment industry. They started believing that certain types of literatures and movies and all of that was fun and entertaining, but they failed to realize that even though they thought it was fun and entertaining, didn't mean that a demon wasn't going to take advantage of that opportunity to make a connection with them. Because there's a lot of people I've discovered that are indirectly inviting the demonic into their life. Other examples that I've dealt with, people can be cursed. They can be dedicated to a demon. People can cultivate relationships with demons. Abuse, which has caused people to turn to the wrong sources to try to put their lives back together. So there are many ways that people are opening up a doorway to the demonic. I will say that demons seem to have a stronger hold on people in the apostate world. Now, what do I mean by that? It means that people who belong to a faith and then turned away from it. So we can say that they knew the truth, but then they walked away. Those people, it does seem that demons have greater control over, which is why exorcism prayers may have to be repeated more than once.
Right. So then, because of the fact that they've maintained stubbornly their rejection of the faith, right? Yes. Rejection of Christianity or Catholicism, especially. Okay, so so you're quite a bit like a detective father, right? Sherlock Holmes, Exorcist, Father Vincent Lampert. Do you have a Watson? Do you have somebody who's an assistant? You have a team, right?
I do. There's a lady that's my kind of right hand. I call her my exorcistant, by the way, kind of jokingly. So she helps me answer correspondence and emails, and she'll reach out to people. She's actually working on a doctoral dissertation right now on generational curses.
Oh, wow. That sounds like somebody's really just a great asset for an exorcist. That's somebody that's committed and that intellectually engaged with the topic, which is, of course, something that happens a lot of times. Is a lot. Father Chad Rippinger speaks a lot about generational curses, if I'm not mistaken. But so you go to an exorcism, you just have your assistant there. That's just, crucifix, please, holy water.
So when there's an exorcism is performed, it's always in a sacred space. As a priest, I prepare myself. I'll celebrate Mass. I go to confession. I'll spend time praying, fasting. Obviously, the afflicted person is there. I require them to bring a family member or a friend. I will have other people present. So it's never a one-on-one situation. And the other people that are there, it's not out of a sense of curiosity, but they're there to pray. These are people who are very faith-filled people. They're truly committed to their faith in God. I always tell people there's no such thing as exorcism tourism. Nobody's there out of a sense of curiosity, because the truth is that when a demon manifests, what it does is sizes up everyone in the room, and it'll determine who the weakest link is and then try to attack that person, either to get inside of their head, so to speak, to instill fear, sometimes to even threaten them with physical violence.
Wow. So, you also have them there, I guess, to pray and to hold the person down if need be, right?
Yes. Yep.
Does it often happen that you can expect physical attacks from the possessed person, that they might attack you, the exorcist, or any other people there? Is that possible?
I think those things are they're only possible if the exorcist does not follow the proper steps. I don't believe there's any such thing as an emergency exorcism. When that happens is when problems ensue. I knew a colleague of mine, he told me that he was doing an exorcism and he didn't really follow the proper protocols, because at the very beginning, the priest says a prayer asking God to protect and safeguard everyone involved in this prayer of the church. And he said he neglected to do that. And during the exorcism, when the demon manifested, he got punched in the face.
Wow.
So when things are not done properly is when problems come about.
Right. So that's all part of the manual, I guess, right? That's been
Yes.
approved by the Holy See. Okay. Sure. So keep that in mind, folks. So then you've got a team of people. And what does a fast look like, Father? There's a lot of back and forth about what's a fast. Is it, one regular meal and two like tiny meals, or what's a fast for an exorcist priest? Like bread and water for 48 hours or what?
I would say, like, if I knew I was going to do an exorcism tomorrow, then I would fast from the evening until after the exorcism was finished.
That you wouldn't eat anything.
Correct.
Wow. Would you drink anything?
Just water.
So, I mean, does that lack of food and drink, does that affect your concentration at all, or you're fine?
I would say I'm fine. Because again,
Right,
I'm
so
relying on the power and the authority of God.
Right. So then, okay. So then you're talking about a 24-hour fast pretty much, right? And
Could be, yes.
wow. So, and okay. So the devil is confronted. You've got all the weapons. What are the weapons?
Well, it's the power, the things that are used. When a priest does an exorcism, he'll have a purple stole on, which is a sign of his priestly office. And, the color purple, the sense of healing, the same one. Purple stole is used in the sacrament of confession and the anointing of the sick. So it's meant to be a sign of healing. And obviously, when a priest is doing an exorcism, he's bringing healing into the life of one who's afflicted by an evil spirit. There is a crucifix. And why is the crucifix used? Because when Jesus is dying on the cross, the devil believed it was his moment, that he had won, that Jesus is now dying. But the moment of his perceived victory is actually the moment of his defeat. So basically, when the priest holds up a crucifix during an exorcism, he's saying, you have been defeated before, you will be defeated again. I did an exorcism in the state of Alaska a few years ago at the request of a bishop there. And the demon only spoke once during that exorcism. And when I held the crucifix up, the demon looked at me and laughed and began to scream and howl and goes, your God is dead. And then began to thrash around on the floor. And that's when it took the rest of the people, the team, to hold the person down while the demon was manifesting in them. The other thing that's used is holy water. That reminds us of our baptism into Christ, by which we have become a new creation. So though you could say the three main things again, the stole, the sign of the priestly office, the crucifix, a sign that the devil has been defeated, and then holy water reminding ourselves of baptism. Because even when the rite begins, after I prepare myself and I have spent time in prayer and determined all these things, the ritual begins by blessing the person with holy water, and then the litany of the saints, calling upon our Blessed Mother and the saints of the church to come and be present during this prayer, the reading of Psalms, gospel accounts of Jesus casting out demons, the prologue of John's gospel. Throughout the rite, I can say the Our Father, the Hail Mary, if I want to watch and observe the different impacts that the parts of the ritual are having on the demon, because the church says I need to pray it through completely, and then I can come back later and repeat those parts of the rite that seem to have a very strong impact on the demon. Trying to get the person to renew their baptismal promises if they have been baptized, laying my hand on the head of the person, and then doing the supplicating prayer directed to God, the breathing on the face of the person, invoking the Holy Spirit, because wherever the Holy Spirit is present, an unclean spirit cannot remain. Recalls Jesus breathing on his disciples and saying, receive the Holy Spirit. And then there would be the imperative, the command to the demon, ordering it to depart based on the power and the authority of Christ. But my experience is a lot of these demons are very talkative because demons don't really want to manifest. People will say, well, if the demon knows they're going to be cast out, why would they manifest? Well, they reach the point where they become so angry and irritated because they can't accept the fact that they are being commanded by a creature that they believe is less than themselves. Basically,
that really
saying,
must irritate.
It's like, how dare you? You know, I had an exorcist tell me that when he was doing one, the demon said, you dumb, crazy monkey, who do you think you are telling me what to do?
Right. So then they suffer from arrogance, huh? That's pretty much a universal trait of all.
Yes.
Wow. So, and so once you've done that, I mean, do you find that you then you're going back to the same prayer? Hey, this was a good one. This is a doozy, man. I invoked St. John Paul II, and he went nuts.
Absolutely.
Right? So you go back and you go and maybe do more prayers about St. John Paul II, or you do more about the Blessed Mother, or more about the Immaculate Conception, or more about St. Joseph, or what do you? How do you go deeper on that one? Just repeat the same prayer again and again and again.
Yeah, invoking this, like saying, calling upon St. John Paul II, through his intercession for you to obey me and to leave immediately. Invoking our Blessed Mother. She's a very powerful ally for anyone who believes her up against the forces of evil. Our Blessed Mother is the greatest example of obedience to God. When the Archangel Gabriel says to her, this is God's plans for you, she responds by saying, let it be done to me according to your word. So she is obedient to God. Obedience defeats the devil.
That's amazing, huh? So, and is this a little bit like? I mean, is it accurate to say that you have to keep on hitting him, like beating somebody with a stick? Is that pretty much it until they just get sick and they up and leave and they can't take it anymore, right?
Yeah, and there is no physical hitting. It's really attacking the demon with the prayers of the church. So there is no physical violence taking place.
What I mean is that it's a persistent application of the force of the prayers and the symbols like the crucifix and the holy water and no, the holy water is not a symbol. But by the way, blessed salt, is that used? Blessed salt?
No, it's not called for in the new ritual.
Okay. We'll leave that one out for the time being. Okay, so dangerous customs. Tell us about the most dangerous customs that get people into hot water. What are at the top of the list?
I think people who are cultivating relationships with demons, the people that are involved in going to like seances and ghost hunting. So they are actively trying to establish a connection and relationships with demons. I had an elderly man, for example, whose family were Christians. He was not, and they were concerned what would happen to him when he died. So I went in and visited with him, and he told me, he said, I know my family is concerned about me, but he goes, when I die, it's my desire to spend eternity in hell with Satan and these demons that I had befriended in this life.
Wow.
I had another young man who told me that after he declared Satan to be his father, he found such a power and strength in his life that he goes, it's so addictive and exhilarating that he would never renounce that.
Amazing.
So you could say these are people that are almost like selling their soul to the devil, so to speak, that they think that they find something in the devil that they can't get elsewhere.
Right. So, and this sort of thing is happening because look at people who are in economic want. Recently, I heard this story. I don't know if it's true or not, but I think Father Chad Rippinger tells a story of supposedly John Lennon made a deal with the devil for fame. No, don't know. It might have been the whole Beatles themselves, and so when that happens, they're really opening the doors wide for possession, aren't they?
Absolutely, because again, the devil is very legalistic. If one makes a pact with the devil, he's going to hold you to it. Now, the human person has the capacity to change. Just because one has made a pact with the devil doesn't mean that that pact cannot be nullified. But the devil would say, no, it's one and done. You've made a pact with me. You now belong to me. And if somebody makes a pact with the devil for fame and power and money, and then they want to renounce that, then oftentimes you'll see these people experience, they might lose their voice. Maybe they go into financial ruin or scandal comes about, because if they're not going to hold up to their end of the bargain, then the devil is going to come after them with a vengeance.
Right. So Ouija boards, are they still a great source, a big source, I should say, not a great, but a big source of demonic problems?
I would say yes. Yeah, people look at that and they just laugh and they go, well, it's just a game board. It's harmless. But it's an introductory level type of thing, because it gets people fascinated with the world of the demonic. And even though someone may believe it's just fun and entertaining, again, it doesn't mean that the demon won't use that as an opportunity to create an attachment with that person. There are a lot of people, they play around with Ouija boards and they ask questions, and then they realize that they've opened up a doorway, if you will, that they don't know how to close.
Okay, now let's go to the Warrens of Connecticut fame. Ed and Lorraine Warren, they were involved in paranormal investigations. I guess you could call them, they were like the real Ghostbusters or something. I mean, ostensibly Catholic people. I mean, is there a role for people like that, like the Warrens, involved in paranormal investigations, or is this just flirting with the demonic?
In my opinion, it's flirting with the world of the demonic, because, people that are involved in all this type of stuff, they might believe that it's good and wholesome. But what the devil may be doing is just trying to get them to believe that it's something good and valuable, just as a way to really draw them in even deeper into the world of darkness. And the devil often does that. People might go to see a psychic or a medium, for example, and they hear something that intrigues them and they believe it's something good. And so they go out of a sense of curiosity, but then that curiosity leads to a reliance. They not just go once, but they start going again and again and again. And the real connection they're making is not with that psychic or medium, it's with the demon that's operating through that person. And either the psychic knows that it's the demon working through them, or they've been duped by the demon in believing that they have power and abilities. So that whole world of paranormal and too much fascination, I think that's very dangerous. Again, and when people are trying to operate outside of the church, you can get yourself in danger, because, in my role, I have the power and the protection of the church behind me. When, even as an exorcist, if I start to step out on my own, I can get myself into trouble. I've known exorcists that have gotten themselves into trouble by writing their own ritual of exorcism, thinking that they know better than the church.
Oh.
They begin to, change things, adapt things. But again,
improvise.
Yeah, that's a dangerous world. And I think when people are involved in this whole world of paranormal investigation and whatnot, they may believe they're well-intentioned. People are doing those things. I always ask, do you have a spiritual director? Or is there a priest that you're connected with that you go and talk to on a regular basis so that you make sure that you're staying right on track? Otherwise, the devil is going to pull people away and they're going to be off course and maybe haven't even realized it, that they're really way out in left field.
Yeah. So now one of the things they did was they created a museum of I guess, vexated objects. What do you call it? Of things that were associated with demonic, I guess, vexation, right? Yes. Dolls and things like that. I mean, that's really, they should just destroy that stuff, right?
I believe so, because otherwise it's going to create a fascination with evil and what the devil is capable of doing, rather than helping to bring people to God. And that's I think that's the clear danger there, is that somebody may begin with the best of intentions, but then the devil pulls them off target.
All right, so they get enamored with ghosts and the darkness, and kind of like it reminds me of Art Bell. Art Bell interviewed Father Malachi Martin, I don't know, numerous times, maybe 3 or 4 times. But again, people end up getting fascinated with that, but maybe they don't go to church on Sunday, right? Or the Ten Commandments have become just suggestions to take it or leave, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
So, this whole thing of people who come to you to kind of finish up this idea, they either come to you and maybe they've got a real problem with the demonic, or maybe they have a loved one that is in a problem and the family comes. Is it part of the treatment to say, look, you've got to reform your life? You open up these doors wide to the demonic come into your life, and now you've got to do something about it. Is that part of the whole process of a good exorcist?
I would say that that's the key element. It's not just a matter of casting the evil out. One has to invite God in. We think of the example in Luke's gospel in chapter 11, where it says that once the demon has been cast out, it goes and wanders through the arid wasteland, and then coming back and finding the house swept clean, it brings 7 other demons worse than itself, and they take up residence in the person. Again, swept clean, meaning it's gone, but God wasn't invited in. I will say I've seen a growing trend in recent years where people want the evil to be gone, but they don't want to invite God in. They begin to treat the exorcist as a modern day magician. Father, use your bag of tricks and make this evil go away, but I want nothing to do with God. And really, an exorcism has everything to do with God. If people believe that I have powers and abilities, if they're relying on me as an individual, we're all in trouble. But if we're relying on, yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, but if they think that I'm the magician or the shaman and I have powers and abilities, we're all in trouble.
Right, because you're not just a plumber. That you get called and you do the job, they pay you and you go, and the problem is pretty much rectified. So then what happens? They don't always reform their lives, do they? After they've been had a deliverance or an exorcism performed.
And for the most part, in working with the person, that's why there's no such thing as an emergency exorcism. It's bringing the person to the right place spiritually so that they will have that desire. Now, I've worked with people and I had believed that they were sincere in wanting to reconnect with God or connect with God for the very first time. And they did that for a period of time, but then they lapsed back into old patterns again. That's why I normally like a person when they come to me to know that they have the support of their local pastor of their church. Because I only can work with somebody for a period of time. They're going to need ongoing pastoral care, and that's going to happen best at their home church. So I want somebody to be linked into a community. And they may do that for a period of time, but then they fall back out again. And in those cases, demons know that if they've been successful with somebody before, they're going to try to attack them again. And so there have been cases where people have been helped through exorcism ministry, but when they turn their back on God again, their situation became even worse than it was before.
Wow, so they have a return of the demons.
Yes.
Wow. Now, you said that you don't do emergency exorcisms. That's great. I understand that. But didn't it happen in St. Peter's Square or someplace that the Holy Father, Pope Francis, came upon a man who had some problems, and it looked like he was possessed? And is it true that Pope Francis actually performed an exorcism on a disturbed bed? Did that happen, or is that maybe it was I seem to recall in the first 2 years of his pontificate that happened.
I heard that story as well, and of course, there's no document. It's not documented anywhere clearly. But from my understanding, it was somebody who was already known to have been afflicted by demons. So the case of the person was known. So it wasn't that the Holy Father was doing something
out of the blue
or kind of in the blind, but the person was known to have been afflicted by demons.
Right. So when he saw the Holy Father, there was a manifestation.
Yes.
Wow. So, amazing. Something I want to share with you is that and I'd like to get your opinion on it, your reaction to it. I've had as a client Zachary King, who used to be a Satanist. He used to be a wizard. His statement concerning Harry Potter was that he, as an ex-Satanist and ex-wizard, he found that it's full of authentic demonic incantations or demonic spells. And he mentioned to me a priest. See if I have the father's name, Father Crotty, I believe. I don't know if you know that name. He was at an event in Arlington Heights, Illinois, and apparently this priest told him that he saw 11 cases involving just a whole panorama of different types of people. And he said that the one thing in common with all these demonic possessions of these 11 individuals was that all of them had like the complete set of Harry Potter books. What's your take on Harry Potter? What's your reaction to what I said about that? Does that seem so far-fetched?
No,
and if so,
I think modern literature like Harry Potter tries to put the demonic into the mainstream, incantations and curses and spells, because it wants to present those things as something positive. I think the danger with a lot of that literature is, I always have people say, well, what's wrong with reading Harry Potter? It's just, all make-believe and it's just fun. It's entertaining. But I think that's how the devil works. He wants to present something that's evil as something good. And so people are reading these things, and then next thing you know, people are trying to place curses and spells on other people. They believe they have power and the authority. And again, it's the evil that would be working through them. We don't have that type of ability. It's outside of human nature. So when parents tell me, well, my child's reading Harry Potter, what's wrong with that? Sometimes I like to respond with another question. And my question is this: which book does your child know better, Harry Potter or the Bible? And
sure,
if they can quote Harry Potter more than they can quote the Bible, then we have a big, big problem.
Absolutely. I would venture to say that the fact that they have these books and they get fascinated by them and they read them and they get drawn in, they do have a big, big problem. I've had to confront people working at an institution that had a Catholic chaplain, and I confronted the students about this. I said, these books are opening you up to danger, and it caused kind of a controversy. It caused some controversy when I did that, because some parents were probably upset. But bottom line is that they can be inviting in demons into their home, into their lives, by reading books like this.
Yeah.
So
people need to know that there's consequences to our actions. Again, we might say, well, I can read this and there's nothing wrong with it. But again, I do believe that Harry Potter books is a way that people can open a doorway to the demonic into their lives. And I think sometimes when people have a strong negative reaction to that, it means we kind of touched a nerve. That maybe they know the element of truth in that, but they just don't want to think that there's consequences to our actions. I had a ghost hunter one time who told me that he was out in a location and encountered these demons, and then he said to the demons, "I'm leaving now, and I don't want you to follow me home."
Good luck.
But then he started to be afflicted by these demons because by his actions, he gave permission to the demons to afflict him. So, and that's the same way with like Harry Potter books. People may not know it, but by actively engaging in these books and trying to say these spells and everything, they are giving permission to the demons to operate in their lives.
Right. So, no Harry Potter. No ghost hunting, no reading. I guess ghost stories are something that people should avoid, right?
The devil plays on a person's memory and imagination. So if we're putting all this stuff into our head, then we're giving the devil a lot of food, so to speak, that he can use to play on us, to cause us to be afraid, to cause our lives to begin to unravel, to give in to despair, discouragement, to lack meaning, purpose, and direction in our lives.
Right, which is, of course, that can give way to no longer having faith in the commandments or in living a worthy Christian life or a decorous Christian life. And Right,
Because,
right. So,
the average Catholic, we don't have to do anything extraordinary to keep the devil out of our lives. It's the very ordinary aspects of our faith. You go to Mass, you receive the sacraments, you pray, you read the Bible. If we're doing these things, the devil is already on the run. It's when people no longer live out the ordinary aspects of our faith, maybe they become bored with it, and then they become intrigued with, the world of magic, the Harry Potter that we were just talking about. Then they're cultivating relationships with demons.
St. Padre Pio we had some incredible visitations on a steady basis of souls that were seeking prayers. I got apparently actual souls in purgatory that needed one more mass or a prayer of some sort. I guess that's true. But, and do you also have cases where there's actually bona fide ghosts and things like that? They've spoken about how, people at different scenes of tragedies have seen ghosts and seen spirits and what have you, orbs and things of that nature. What's your reaction to all that, Father?
For the spirit of one who has died to manifest in this reality, God has to permit that. So once we die, we cannot choose on our own to act in this reality. And to me, the only reason why God would permit a soul that has died to manifest is because the soul is seeking prayers. So the soul in purgatory that is reaching out for help. So to me, and a good way to know the difference, when somebody tells me, "Hey, I've been seeing something in the house, or the lights are going on and off, and I'm hearing footsteps," and I always say, "Well, is it terrifying? Are you afraid?" And they're like, "No, it's not afraid." And to me, that may be a good indication that it's the soul of one who has died in purgatory who's reaching out for help. I heard a story from a fellow exorcist that a priest had died, and then after he had died, there was all this strange occurrences happening in the priest's office. So they went into the office and they found in his drawer all these mass intentions that were never fulfilled.
Oh, wow.
People would come in and say, "Father, I want to have a mass offered for my grandmother," or whatever. He just threw everything in the drawer and did nothing with them.
Oh, wow.
And so in that case, it was believed that the soul of the priest was in torment for not fulfilling his priestly obligations to offer these masses. So then in that diocese, the bishop had those masses sent out to all the missions throughout the world. And once those masses were offered for those folks, everything stopped. It's almost an indication that the soul of that priest indicated that it finally had received the prayers that it needed as a way to, be purified and go on to heaven, so to speak.
Right. And you're just wondering, I don't know where most souls go when they die. A lot of people go to hell. Wide is the path that leads to destruction. But, is that something that God would be willing to do for souls in purgatory? Or is it, if you're lucky, if you win the lottery down there? I don't know.
Well, the notion of, there's a lot of misunderstanding, I think, what is purgatory. The notion is that the Bible tells us that not all sins are deadly, but we're all going to die in some stain of sin. But we have to realize that no stain of sin can be in the presence of God the Father. The line in Scripture, "You must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect." So the souls in purgatory are being perfected. The sins that they carry that do not merit eternal damnation need to be cleansed away. As gold is tested in the fire and it's purified and the dross is burned away, we can say the souls in purgatory, in a certain sense, they're already in a state of grace because they know they're bound for heaven and not for hell. But again, they have to be purified before they can be in the presence of the Father.
And a lot of people, because we think of Mary Todd Lincoln, who lost several little children, and then her son William, I think, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 children died. And then, of course, Abraham Lincoln died, and she was really involved in seances. Mm-hmm. So, of course, people, when they lose a loved one, they have this intense desire to communicate with them. And but that's so. You mentioned talking with the dead. If you ask for pray to a deceased relative for help, is that the same as talking to the dead, Father?
No, because again, it's intercessory prayer. You're not trying to conjure the spirit of that person up.
Not that they
You know, that
appear. That's the conjuring, right? The conjuring is trying to achieve appearance, correct?
yeah, correct.
Or direct communication.
And that's a practice that's condemned in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 18. Do not try to, communicate with the dead. Even King Saul, he wanted to conjure up the spirit of Samuel. So he went to see the witch of Endor, and the witch was trying to conjure up Samuel. And when Samuel appeared, even the witch was amazed but it wasn't that she did it, but God permitted it. And then because of that action, we know then that Saul eventually it brought about his death, and then David went on to be king. So again, it's that notion of being obedient to God. But again, when we do intercessory prayers, that's a lot different than conjuring up the spirits of the dead. Because when we do intercessory prayer, we're asking God through the prayers of that person. When we're trying to conjure up the soul of one who's died, we're trying to rely on that person's power or whatever. We're trying to circumvent God, so to speak.
Right. And something interesting I'll share with you. I actually spoke with William Peter Blatty before he passed away, who wrote the book The Exorcist. He lost, I think, a grandson or maybe a son, and he wrote a book about, his name was Peter, about, I forget the name of the book, but he wrote a book about all the strange happenings that occurred after Peter had died. Do you see a lot of problems like this? That houses with strange noises and things of that nature? And
oh yeah, I see thousands of those every year.
And people are really freaked out and really bothered by it usually, or is it that they're curious about it, or they're like in a state of high anxiety, or what?
They're really freaked out about it because, again, they're terrified about what's happening and, seeing shadow figures, lights going on and off, hearing noises in the house, maybe hearing talking coming from another room, voices of, sometimes people believe it's those who had lived there before.
Right.
I was going to say an example would be a neighborhood in Indianapolis. A lot of the neighbors claim to see the spirits of this family. They could even name them. So we did some investigation. That family had actually been murdered in their old farmhouse. This is now a new subdivision, but they were murdered in that farmhouse like around 1917.
In that location.
Nobody there knew any of that stuff, but they could tell you the names of the children, the mom and the dad. But then once these places were blessed and we said prayers for the repose of the souls of these people, everything completely stopped.
Wow. So then it looks like these were actually bona fide souls that just needed some prayers, right?
Yes. Yep.
Wow. Amazing. And then, by the way, just out of 10 instances of something like that, how many are really basically that where they need prayers and it's not like they're demons, but they're just like supplicating souls that want prayer?
99%.
50-50?
No, 99% of the time it's demons.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. On that note, we'll say goodbye. Exorcism, the battle against Satan.